why beating the LSU Tigers is just going to mean more for these Bears. Let's get Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on YouTube. And you've already looked at the calendar, so you know who my guest is. They need no introduction. It is a Wicker Wednesday for Sydney Wicker, who is getting some of that Midwest weather finally down there in Texas that she has brought with her. So you can thank her for that.
No.
Sydney, have you recovered? Have you recovered from all the college football playoff madness from over the weekend?
Not really. I feel like
how can we, honestly?
How can we? Seriously. The bags under my eyes only get heavier. I think you'd mentioned,
which has become a theme, by the way, the last couple of weeks with you.
I know.
In fact, family members are pointing it out.
Yes,
it's not very kind.
My mom loves to comment on how tired I look, but that only means I'm doing my best work for all of you.
Yes. So, and I think she said that. I think if you read between the lines of your mom's comment, that's what you would have found.
Well, I was told that I need to go to Ulta and start looking at eye cream. So
you're going to really read between the lines. You got to really get in between those lines, to be fair.
I do love my mother so much. So I really do. But
moms are cool.
She's the best. She really is. But Mom, I don't have time to sleep. Be nice to me.
That's not very fun. Does she listen? Does she listen to the pod when you're on? Okay. All right. Because I know you've got your own fan base and have adopted some of our fans for sure. But I know there's some specific people who will only listen on Wicker Wednesdays, which is great, which is fine. That's totally fine. Your first listen every Wednesday is, I think, the motto of Locked On. But we are now fully in bowl mode. Last week we were talking about kind of conference championships, putting the bow on the season. And now, after such a great ride for a month and a half, I mean, really 2 months here, now you just get to wait, 3.5, 4 weeks. It's actually 3 weeks from when we are recording right now that the Bears will take the field next against LSU. So we are fully into bowl mode, which means arguably the most chaotic couple of weeks of the year for college football.
This is the March Madness of football season.
Kind of, yeah. The portal, the coaching carousel, the opt-outs, it's all going to be coming thick and fast here. And thankfully, knock on wood, it's been pretty good for Baylor so far in terms of the portal situation, but they might not survive the coaching carousel, which is, when we're talking about assistants, that's usually a good thing. That means you've had a good year. And it seems as though a Baylor defensive coordinator, maybe in name only, in Matt Powledge, might be on the move. I'm talking about this Dave Campbell's Texas football story from yesterday, where Mike Craven, who covers this state like I don't know, a blanket. I think that's the term. He's so great at covering all the levels of this state for college football. And he has, of his 4 that he mentions for the Sam Houston head coach opening, his number 1 DCTF pick is Matt Powledge. So the athletic director mentioned that Sam Houston ties is a determining factor in the upcoming decision on a head coach to replace Casey Keeler. You won't find many people prouder of their Bearcats roots than Powledge, who is a Huntsville native and former captain of the Sam Houston football team. He has coached for Dave Aranda, Mark Stoops, and the departing Casey Keeler. Feels like a good landing spot for Powledge, right? That feels like a good decision, if that's the case.
I mean, coaches move around so much all the time. It's so much nicer when your move is pretty easy and just kind of down the road.
It would almost be this would be the ultimate silver lining and kind of blessing in disguise, because let's be honest, it's been a weird tenure for Powledge. He comes in last year from Oregon. He is the full-time defensive coordinator for the first time in his career. After Dave Aranda had fired Ron Roberts, who he'd been with at a bunch of different stops. So that was a lot of pressure on that. And it was not a good year for either side or all 3 facets of the game for Baylor. Let's say you get to 3-9. And then last year, around this time, Dave Aranda says, I'm going to keep my job, but I'm going to be calling the plays now, Matt. You'll still be the defensive coordinator, but I'm going to be calling the plays. I mean, that's got to be like a real awkward transition. I mean, he probably kicks the tires on some other jobs, but he's like, look, best case is I stick around here for a year as the D-Kino, DC in name only, and maybe it comes with a job next year. I mean, that's got to be like a real awkward spot, Sydney.
It's got to be a little bit of a gut punch. I mean, you came in with the main title, and then a year in you get demoted. Like, nobody wants that. And being an alum from Sam Houston, like, it just makes sense. And it could be a really good opportunity for him to try out a head coaching role. And it's not like you're going to LSU and you're gonna nobody's gonna remember this if things do go poorly. Like, it's okay. And I think that would be a really safe spot for him, a good move, a good chance for Baylor to kind of do some re-examining on the defensive side. Dave Aranda, the fact that they're in this situation to begin with the run that they've had, is impressive, because I've mentioned it before. Being so unorganized that you didn't have a consistent rhythm halfway through the season is probably why you finished the season 8-4 instead of maybe only having 2 losses, maybe only 1 loss, maybe even being undefeated and playing Arizona State for that conference title. I don't know, but you have to have structure and organization. That is the biggest piece of being a head coach, is having that. And when you're all over the place trying to figure things out, that's not good. So some changes have to be made to begin with on the defensive side. And I think this would be a great move for everybody, like you had said.
And I am interested to see where Baylor goes with this, because I'm already putting Matt Powledge in a Sam Houston polo. I mean, look, the guy's got to want the job. The AD says we want Sam Houston ties. It does not get more tied in than being a native of Huntsville and being a captain of the Sam Houston teams and playing for their most successful coach who just left. So I'm already putting him there. I'm putting him back in Huntsville, outside the state prison, of course. But I've already putting him back there. So Baylor, do you hire a full DC? Is Dave going to continue calling the plays? Do you promote a guy like Jamar Chaney? And do you even do that for the bowl game? Because that person's not calling the plays anyway. So what's the point for doing it for a bowl game, for just to have that title? I don't know. It's a weird place to go. And I got to wonder, how Mac Rhodes looks at this, right? Because one of the factors he had of bringing Dave Aranda back was, okay, Dave, now you're calling the plays.
Yep.
It wasn't the best year defensively, and these last couple of weeks it looked a lot better. It seemed like they found more of an identity. But I wonder, does Mac say, hey, you know what, Dave, we like that, but how about you bring in another one of your guys for DC? That's an interesting way to go for Baylor here.
It is. I think you have to make things official, though, with Matt. You can't start thinking about all this in the head.
I've made it official. That's a Locked On Baylor official. Matt Powledge, Sam Houston.
You could say that. Me, as a reporter, I will not be putting that information out until Sam Houston says so themselves. Sorry, Cam. I'm not a skip ahead kind of gal.
Whatever. Journalism. So, it is not official yet. And look, Sam Houston, it's new to FBS. It's not a bad job. I mean, I'm not saying Matt Powledge is their only option here. He makes a ton of sense, but they can do a real search. It doesn't even need to be a national search, man. You can get some good Texas options, and you don't have to look very far. Or maybe in one case you do have to look very far, because Scotty Walden is on the short list according to a lot of reports, and he is at UTEP, which is the distance between Huntsville and El Paso is like Huntsville to Philadelphia, which is incredible. So maybe you do have to look pretty far, but I've declared it. Sydney's holding off because she's a journalist, but I now shift my focus to see where Baylor goes from here, and how they and I will then have to give a congratulations. There we go to Matt Powledge. But where does Baylor go from there? Immediately they go to the Texas Bowl against LSU. And Dave Aranda talked about yesterday how there could be some extra motivation for the team and their players. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. Today's Locked On Baylor episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So a lot of the focus coming into this bowl selection and hearing that it was LSU, a lot of the focus from Baylor fans was who they're not playing. And I will say I'm kind of guilty of that, of doing a couple segments on this podcast, but I can't help it. It gets me fired up that the Aggies ducked them again. But what you get is an LSU team with an identical record to you at 8-4, a team that came in with plenty of hype in the preseason. They lose that first game to USC, which becomes a lackluster USC team at 6-6, 7-5, whatever they are. And we kind of forget about LSU, but they're ranked 10 out of the 12 weeks. Baylor's not ranked for any weeks, any of the 12. I think they didn't receive votes until the end of the season. And it was like one vote. So on paper, this is a mismatch. And I have not checked the line, but McMurphy's opening line before that the actual selection was 4.5 to LSU. So let me ask you this, Sydney. I feel great about going into this matchup, not like, oh, Baylor's going to win by 4 touchdowns, but I like that they're facing an SEC team and that they get this opportunity. So when you heard LSU, were you like, oh crap?
The only reason I was bummed was because it would have just made my life a lot easier.
If they played A&M, yeah, it would have been perfect for the local sports reporter.
I think all the local news stations were hoping for that. I mean, Houston's not really a far drive anyways. Like, we could have done a lot out of our coverage.
Get 2 birds stoned at once.
Yeah. Oh, so easy. It would have just personally made my life easier. But hearing LSU, I didn't really think twice about it. I thought this is a perfect opportunity for Baylor to prove something. You don't know how many guys are going to opt out for LSU or what exactly all that looks like. We've seen a lot of bowl games start to mean nothing, but I think this game means a lot for Baylor. And with the way they've ended this season so far and the momentum and the ride that they've been on, this kind of sets you up for what next season could be. And it gives a lot of hope. And I think if you're able to get a win in this game, it really sets you up for some success moving into the next season. I don't think a loss necessarily means that they're not going to be successful, but I just think it brings something different. So when I heard LSU, I just was kind of like, I still think it's winnable. I don't think it's unwinnable for the Bears. I think they still have a good shot.
Absolutely. And like that's something that gets lost in the fold.
Yeah.
Because so many bowls are meaningless now. But like I've seen it as a Baylor fan. Like, that does really bring positive momentum when you win that game, no matter how meaningless it is. Yeah. And it's really rotten when you lose it. I'll give you 2 examples right off the bat. 2018, they win that final game of the regular season to get into the bowl game. And this is Matt Rule's second year. So you're coming off a 1-11. You get to 6-6. You have an awesome Texas Bowl victory against Vandy. Really exciting game. And that carries over into the next year when you start out 11-1. And I'll point it to a couple years ago, that awful 2022 season, the end of it, where they lost 3 straight games going into the bowl. They're playing at a game at their rival stadium. It's like 2 degrees outside, and they lose to a service academy. That carries over into a 3-9 season in 2023. So this still matters, and it's still fun. And Dave Aranda's team is finding extra ways to be motivated, but I'll let him tell you about it.
They're excited about it. And I was talking with a couple guys this morning, just in particular, walking in, and we were talking about this very thing. And they're excited about the opportunity to play against a team that they respect, that scouts are going to want to look at in terms of eval. Right, it's an opportunity to put good play on tape versus a good opponent, And our guys are out hunting for respect, and so they see our opponent as a way to go and compete and fight and earn some respect. And so I think that's a strong motivation. It's pretty strong motivation right now.
Hunting for respect. I love that. Dave, we have gone into full, we've had these ebbs and flows of Dave, right? We had the analogies, Berenstein Bears, Dave. We had a great week of practice, Dave. We have a really dry Dave. And some of these days still, we have almost John Wick, Dave. Which is someone he's compared himself to a few times. So that's coming from Dave. And that's what it felt like in this presser yesterday, where it was just we got to prove to the nation that we belong. And I love hearing that the players are all psyched about playing an SEC team, because it's all boiled up the last couple of weeks, specifically Big 12 and SEC, with the SEC bias and getting no respect to the Big 12. So it feels like this is the perfect moment for it.
Oh, yeah. I think it's
even in a meaningless game.
All of the storylines, too, the fact that Aranda's going to face his old team for the first time since he left. There's so much that goes into it that adds on to it. I didn't count how many times he mentioned respect in that. He mentioned it quite a few, though. And
Aretha Franklin levels, several times. Yeah. He did everything but spell it out.
I mean, come on. Exactly. Just we've got the same mindset going on, Cam.
This is why Wicker Wednesdays work. This is, www right there. I like that, and I've always appreciated this about Dave, whether it's been answers that have pissed people off or what. We talk about it all the time. He's honest to a fault, and he's not afraid to say what everyone's thinking. Because a lot of coaches would have just downplayed that and been like, yeah, LSU, good program, good coaches over there, have a lot of respect for them, looking forward to playing them. But he's out there saying, when you play an SEC team and it's on ESPN, that's more for NFL scouts to look at. That's the kind of stuff they're looking at. And hey, we hear the chatter about the SEC and the disrespect that the Big 12 gets. And so we're ready to go out there and prove why we belong. I love that. And I really want Dave Aranda to win this game because A, I cover the Bears and I am a Baylor alum and fan, but B, I think it's right for Dave Aranda to beat Brian Kelly.
I would love it.
Is Brian Kelly a better football coach? Yes. Better resume? Yes. But I said this the other day, I don't think anyone likes Brian Kelly. LSU has great fans, some of the most passionate in America. And I think they respect that he wins football games, but I don't think anyone likes him. And I don't think I knew plenty of Notre Dame fans growing up. They didn't like Brian Kelly. Nobody does. And the flip side is Dave Aranda does not have the resume of Brian Kelly, but everyone, specifically outside of Baylor, loves Dave Aranda. So that this could be a culture win here.
Now that you say that, I really didn't think about it like that, but it's so true. I mean, I never cared for Notre Dame as an organization because I think it's so dumb that they won't join a conference.
Dude, at some point, the NCAA is going to tell them, you got we're done with this. That's been my long-standing Notre Dame take.
I just can't. So I couldn't stand him for a while just because I can't stand Notre Dame and their franchise as a whole. But it's funny that you say that. He has to be probably one of the most unliked coaches.
Certainly for a really successful coach. Yeah.
He does find ways
and this
to
is
win.
this is also a great rivalry. And that's just Brian Kelly versus bowl games. Mainly prestigious bowl games he does not do well in. I'm sure know of Notre Dame's record.
Look at the Big 10 games that he's lost while he's been at LSU.
I mean, there's plenty. And anything you just put a marquee on, even this USC game to open the season, they suck early in the season against those big in those big games. And anything that you put some lights around, it's I don't know, Brian Kelly, LSU, it doesn't go well. So maybe the lights will be dim enough that it's the Texas Bowl. But that is going to be a fun matchup, and clashing of styles big time. Like Dave
excited.
Aranda is not going to fake anything.
No.
And Brian Kelly from Everett, Massachusetts is going to be like, oh, we're doggone ready to play the game tomorrow. And he's going to put on this act. But it's
come on, he's coming to the Texas Bowl. He better have the boots on and all.
Oh, you know he will. And it's going to be like, his wife isn't even going to tell him it looks good. He's like, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to put it on.
Honestly, respect for that.
Let me ask you this, Sydney, as someone who covers the Big 12 now, but I think you would consider yourself a Big 10 girly. I think that's fair, right? How do you feel about the SEC bias? Because we've obviously had it for a long time, but with this 12-team playoff and what's transpired the last couple of weeks, it feels like it's worse than ever.
I think a lot of people aren't going to like what I have to say.
Oh,
but after
no.
covering the SEC, it does mean more.
Oh, God.
It does. It really, really does. I'm sorry, Cam.
That means it means more to beat them.
It does mean more to beat them. It does, 100%.
Okay.
But they play a different level of ball. There's a reason why Alabama won so many national titles, why Georgia is on this streak of winning titles.
But like, is Vandy at a different level?
No.
Mississippi State's at a different level. Just not a higher level.
They can be. I will say some of the coolest environments I've ever seen, though, are at Davis Wade Stadium, hands down. And I've seen them pull off some cool wins.
Oh, cowbell, great.
It's great. You want me to pull mine out right now, Cam? Because I will.
No, you don't. I had plenty of that.
Loud and proud.
When you work in TV news, you get plenty of meteorologists that have their own cowbells. Good meteorology school at Mississippi State. Yes, ma'am.
They do have a good meteorology.
Yeah, it's a good program. So I've heard enough. I am
never
not
enough.
I am not Christopher Walken, man. I do not need more cowbell.
But when you look at a conference schedule and you look at how you play, like the teams that you play, they're always going to have the tougher hand. So there should be a bias for a reason. The teams in the SEC have the hardest battle to get through. They do.
UT schedule? They
really got lucky this year. I'll be honest. But like when you look
Alabama
at Alabama
losing to 2 6-6 teams and saying they should be in the playoff.
They didn't get in.
Okay, so let me
rather have Bama in or SMU or freaking Clemson.
SMU.
No,
yeah, I'd rather
lose in the first round. Sorry, y'all. I don't
know. Penn State's overrated, man. I give the Ponies a real chance.
I give the Ponies every year. That's why Michigan and Ohio State are always the top two.
I give the Ponies a real shot. Okay. Then let me ask you this. All right. So you believe that the SEC should have a bias in a positive way from your viewpoint. But then let me reiterate the question. Has it gone too far?
No, I just think they have a lot of expectations.
Okay.
Sorry.
You know, I've done so many anti-SEC things the last few days. I don't even have the energy to rebut.
I was looking up what you've talked about. I was like, oh man, Cam is not going to like what I have to say.
That's why we keep you here. Yep. That's why we keep you here. This is not the yes ma'am podcast. I mean, that's not what this is. Okay. I just think it's too much. And I think with this 12-team playoff, it's just going to allow for more SEC teams and Big Ten teams instead of what we originally thought it was going to be, which was giving more of a chance to the little guy. And I don't see that in the future. I think we see much more of these Alabama arguments that we saw this year. And I think more often than not, Alabama is going to win those arguments. They didn't this year. And I thought that was correct.
I just think it needs to come down to consistency. Are you going to base it off of the record? Is it going to be strength of schedule? Like pick your battles and how you rank them and stick with it. Because we've seen different things every single time. That's why Florida State fans were so mad last year. They followed the rule book to a T.
Yes. Yes. I was mad for them.
Yes. Being in Tallahassee was the scariest time of my career. I thought the whole city was getting burnt down.
I felt for them. And to kind of close out this point, because I was talking about it during the selection show, everyone they went through was about who they lost to, and how quality these losses were. And then we get to SMU, Alabama, and it was like, Well, who did SMU beat? It's like, come on. Now we're just going to avoid, and we get that graphic that says, record against teams above 500 to take away the 2 losses that Alabama had against 500 teams. So it's obviously not going away anytime soon. But this is a chance for Baylor to show that the Big 12 can hang with these guys. And we already know what the company line is going to be if Baylor does win the game. Oh, well, who cares? Texas Bowl doesn't even matter. It'll say the same thing. If USC beats A&M, it'll be the same thing. So just brace yourself for it. Or if Sydney's Michigan Wolverines beats Alabama.
For the second time in 2024?
It will be the same company line. So anyway, speaking of like shifting in power, that could be happening in the college basketball world. Kind of shockwaves going around yesterday. And can Baylor continue to keep up in this changing world of college basketball? That's next on Locked On Baylor. Not too much of a surprise in terms of like what we knew leading up to this decision, but the numbers that come afterwards, big time surprise. So AJ DeBonsa, the number 1 prospect in high school basketball in the class of 2025, committed yesterday to BYU, which in a vacuum, if you had told me that a couple months ago, I'd be like, wow, that's a shock. Yeah. But there was certainly some real momentum there. Now the figures that come out after, Adam Zangora had this, had him at making anywhere between $5 and $7 million to play 1 year in Provo, Utah. We've heard some big time numbers in football, Sydney. Of course, that was going to come to basketball sooner rather than later, but $5 to $7 million?
That would be so nice.
It's great work if you can get it. And he didn't hire an agent, so they're keeping all of that.
That's insane. For like an 18-year-old kid, too.
For an 18-year-old kid from Brockton, Massachusetts, man.
Crazy.
It's not a bad life. BYU. This is what we talked about when BYU was coming into the Big 12. Massive fan base, big endowment, massive alumni. They own a religion when it comes to major colleges, okay? They've even got offshoots. They've got BYU Idaho, formerly Rick's College. They've got BYU Hawaii. They've got them everywhere. And now we are seeing that come to fruition in the NIL space. Let me start with asking you this before we get into the Baylor side of it, the Big 12 side of it. Is BYU like a true sleeping giant? Is this the last that we're going to hear about BYU spending just buku money on some of the big time basketball prospects?
Specifically with basketball?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'll have to put this in there too. DeBonsa was playing high school basketball in Utah. So it's not like he's coming from the mean streets of Brockton right to Provo. And there's a lot of those schools now. A lot of those big time prep basketball schools are in Utah.
I feel like this is not the last time we'll hear about this, but I do feel like it's going to be a once in a while kind of story. I don't think Provo is somewhere that everyone has on their list, but when you have ties to it, I mean, I get it. I haven't gone to games, but I covered Colorado State playing Utah State, and the Utah fans that would travel to Colorado State were incredible. And we sent a crew there while I was in college, and they came back saying it was one of the best environments that they had ever been to. And I think that's easy to sell on somebody who wants that. And if you're only there for a year, don't you want it to be the most fun? Don't you want to pave your own way or to leave behind a legacy of sorts? And if you have the opportunity to do that, why not? And I think those were probably all factors that went into it for him too. But I don't think it's going to be the last time we hear about this for BYU, but I don't think we're going to hear this every single season.
And you will, by the way, when the BYU swarm comes in whatever sport it is, because we didn't get them at all this year. I guess we'll have them in basketball. I got to check the schedule. Maybe not, but they are one of the best fan bases in America. And in basketball, you'll have 15, 20,000 there every night.
Yeah.
And it's electric there. So I can't blame them on that end. And looking at it from the Big 12 perspective, And from the Baylor perspective, because we've talked about this, but Baylor basketball was way ahead of the curve in NIL in terms of their peers and way ahead of Baylor football, which is one of the only schools in the country that happened at, that basketball was way ahead of it. And clearly they're not in a spot where they're, struggling. They brought in, I think, 2 pretty big time NIL guys through the transfer portal this year. They certainly have to have NIL for 2 top freshmen in Rob Wright and VJ Edgecombe, but they were on DeBonce's list for a long time. It was really only the last month or so that they fell off of that. And you look at that figure, $5 to $7 million, and not all of that's coming from the school, but they obviously have a big hand in that.
Yeah.
Can a school like Baylor, because this is obviously more common in basketball than football, those small schools that can really do well, Baylor, Villanova, Duke, can those schools, do they have the NIL space to keep up if the numbers are going to get that big for one and dones?
I think they do.
Okay. Positive Sydney here.
I don't know if you've been ahead of it. I don't know if you're not going to see 5 million every year.
Mm-hmm.
But
hopefully not. Yeah.
That's a little crazy.
That's a lot, man.
A lot of money.
Not that he doesn't deserve it or anything like that, but that's just a crazy figure.
I think big picture, you've already been competing with it and keeping up with it. You're not going to get every kid. It's not going to happen that way, nor do you need everyone that you look at. It's good to have those number 1 guys or whatever, but you just need guys that are going to be a part of your culture and be a part of your program and contribute to that. You don't need to pay a kid $5 million every single time to bring them in to make a difference.
And I do wonder the worth of it all to kind of close out these thoughts here. It's
we'll see that.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Baylor the last couple of years get some of the best one and dones in the country. Like Yves Missy's making a push for Rookie of the Year right now in the NBA. Yeah. We've seen it, and it doesn't always work. I mean, this is a team that's lost in the second round 3 straight years. So is it it's going to have to be a worth thing for these schools to say, yeah, I mean, he's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft, but I pay him $5 million and he gets injured for a couple of weeks, or we have another injury for a couple of weeks, or we get a bad matchup in the second round. And all of a sudden we're not even playing into the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. Like that's where it's different than from football. Football, you've got them 2 to 3 years, and you've got opportunities to, it's more of a power balance versus, a single elimination 68 team NCAA tournament. So I feel like at some point it's not going to be worth it to bring in that kind of star power. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Anyway, Sydney, we will have you on, of course, a couple of times here before. A couple of times here before the bowl game. We're gonna have to work out some schedules because we both got holiday schedules coming up in a couple of weeks. Before we know it, God, I have not done enough shopping.
I haven't either.
Anyway, Sydney, now that we're kind of winding down high school football, real quick, what do you guys got coming up on KCEN and the 6 Plus app?
6 Plus app, you got it. Yeah, available on Roku TV, Apple TV, and Fire TV or Fire Stick, whatever it's called.
Yes.
Lots of high school state championship stuff. Hopefully, our teams are competing this weekend with a trip to state on the line. We've got 3 local teams left, which is awesome. La Vega, one of those, right out of Waco, so that's good. And then we'll be heading to Dallas if that's the case. Of course, we'll be in Houston for the bowl game. We're going to try to get some cool stories up before that, which will be on the 6 Plus app too. So yeah, just download it. You never know what's going to come from us, but we'll make it a lot and it'll be worth it.
It's been tough for my Oglesby Tigers. Too bad.
I know.
Great season. Was really hoping to get back. That was a Robinson, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was freezing cold and raining. Awful.
You should start covering some games up here in Illinois. See what that.
No,
I won't put you through that. Sydney Wicker.
I've done my Midwest.
She will keep you up to date on everything local, including Baylor and the Aggies, if you're into that kind of thing. Yeah. And we will have her on next Wednesday. But anyway, thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. We've got more portal chatter. We've got more bowl coverage coming up on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.